Welcome to this deep dive. You wanted to learn more about mindfulness and concentration, and this text on Buddhist meditation practices is perfect for that. It's amazing how much it clarifies about the relationship between those two. We're going to find some really practical techniques for understanding the mind.
It really is fascinating. One of the first things the Source does is tackle this common misconception that mindfulness and concentration are separate practices.
Yeah, that's something I think we've all encountered.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like we try to put them in these separate boxes. Like mindfulness is about just observing without judgment, and then concentration's like this laser focus thing.
Yeah.
But this text really argues that the Buddha saw them as deeply intertwined.
So it's not an either-or thing. They really work together.
Exactly. It's more like mindfulness is the pathway to right concentration.
Oh.
Or what's called jhana in Buddhist tradition.
Jhana.
Yeah, and that word jhana, it's often really misunderstood.
Yeah, I can see how that might be.
Yeah. People think it's like this intense trance or something.
Right.
But the Source paints a much richer picture.
I'm intrigued.
Well, it uses these really vivid analogies like, for instance, kneading water into dough until the flour is completely saturated.
That's a powerful image. What does that have to do with jhana?
It really tries to get at this idea that this state of right concentration, it's not about, shutting off the world or anything. It's about full body awareness.
Yeah.
It's a pleasurable absorption that's all encompassing, almost like a cool spring bubbling up and suffusing a whole lake with its fresh water.
So it's not about forcing the mind to be still, but more like this natural settling that happens through cultivating mindfulness.
Precisely. The Source even points out that mindfulness and this whole body awareness reach a state of purity in the fourth jhana. They become inseparable. It's amazing to think that even when we're just starting out with something as simple as breath meditation, we're already cultivating both mindfulness and concentration simultaneously.
So even just focusing on the breath can be a gateway to this deeper state of jhana.
Absolutely. And the Source breaks down mindfulness practice into 3 distinct stages, which beautifully highlight this interplay between mindfulness and concentration. Let's take the example of the body to illustrate this.
Okay, so let's dive into that first stage. What does it mean to establish a frame of reference, especially when it comes to our own bodies?
In this first stage, you're cultivating a very specific kind of attention towards the body, focusing on it in and of itself. This means putting aside all those judgments and concerns we usually have about how our body looks, how it functions in the world. All of that falls away. You're left with a raw sensation of bodiness.
I can already sense how challenging that might be. Our minds tend to wander, don't they? Especially when we're trying to just be with physical sensations.
Absolutely. And that's precisely where the breath becomes such an important tool. It acts as an anchor, a stable point to return to whenever your mind inevitably drifts off. The key is to gently guide your attention back to the breath, again and again, letting thoughts come and go without getting swept away by them.
So there's this gentle but persistent effort involved in staying present with the physical sensations. It's not just about spacing out, right?
Exactly. It's a very active engagement with the present moment. And the Source highlights 3 specific qualities that we cultivate in this stage: mindfulness, alertness, and ardency.
Can you break down those 3 qualities for me? I'm intrigued, especially by that last one, ardency.
Okay, so think of mindfulness as the act of remembering. Remembering to bring your attention back to the body, remembering the techniques you're practicing, remembering the insights you've gained along the way. Alertness, on the other hand, is about being aware of what's happening right now in your experience without adding any judgment. Are you with the breath? Is the breath comfortable? You're simply noticing these things as they are.
And ardency, how does that fit in?
Ardency is the energy, the zeal that fuels your practice. It's that immediate redirecting of your mind when you realize it's wandered off. But it's also about having a keen sensitivity to what's happening in the present moment. You're not just passively observing, but actively exploring the nuances of your experience.
It reminds me of how the Source mentions that all mental processes are like tar babies. If you pull them towards you, you get stuck. If you fight them off, you get stuck.
That's a great connection. Ardency isn't about clinging to the breath or forcing the mind to be still, but about finding that middle way, that skillful engagement with the present moment.
So it's this active, curious exploration of what's happening, rather than a forced stillness or a spaced out kind of mindfulness.
You got it. And the Source emphasizes that it's the cultivation of these 3 qualities together, mindfulness, alertness, and ardency, that allows the mind to settle down and find a sense of ease with the body in the present moment.
And I imagine that sets the stage for the second stage of mindfulness practice.
Precisely. And that's where things get even more intriguing.
Okay, so we've established this foundation of mindfulness. Like, we have this ability now to stay present with the body and the breath. What happens next? What's this deeper exploration about?
Well, this second stage, it's all about exploring the fascinating workings of the mind itself, like delving into those cause and effect currents that are constantly flowing through our minds. This are rising and passing away.
Okay, so we're going beyond just observing the sensations. Now we're trying to understand how things actually work in our minds, how these thoughts and emotions come and go.
Exactly. And here's a really important point that the Source makes. To understand cause and effect in the mind, you can't just be passive.
Okay.
It requires active participation. You can't just sit back and watch the show.
Right.
You really have to engage and experiment and even make mistakes to truly learn.
It's like learning by doing.
Yes. You can read about something or listen to someone explain it, but to truly understand it, you have to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
You have to try it out for yourself. The Force uses this analogy of learning about eggs. It says you can look at an egg all day long, but to truly understand its nature, you have to crack it open.
Right.
You have to cook with it, try different techniques, see how it responds.
So to understand our minds, we have to make something of them. Like, we have to work with our thoughts and emotions in a more active way.
Exactly. It's about taking that mindful awareness of the breath and the body that we've cultivated in the first stage and using that as a foundation to investigate the more subtle workings of the mind.
Okay.
And this applies to both challenging mental states like anger and to positive qualities like mindfulness and concentration themselves.
Okay, so can you give me an example? Like, how we might use this active approach to dealing with anger. Let's say I'm feeling angry. How can I work with that feeling skillfully?
Well, the Source actually gives a specific technique. It suggests that you consciously engage with the anger. It's like you're having a conversation with it. You ask yourself, okay, anger, why are you here? What's causing you to arise right now? And you just keep probing deeper and deeper. But why am I angry about that specifically? You might uncover some hidden assumptions or beliefs that are fueling that anger. Maybe you're holding on to some expectation that hasn't been met, or you're reacting to a perceived threat or something.
So it's not about suppressing the anger or getting rid of it. It's more about understanding its roots, like seeing the underlying causes and conditions that are bringing it to life.
Precisely. And it's this willingness to get curious, to actively explore our experience that cultivates both mindfulness and concentration. Remember that tar baby analogy?
Yeah.
When we approach anger with curiosity rather than resistance, we're less likely to get stuck in those sticky mental patterns.
I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together now. The breath as an anchor, the qualities of mindfulness, alertness, and ardency, and now this active engagement with our thoughts and emotions. It's all part of this journey of understanding the mind, isn't it?
Yeah, you're getting it.
Yeah.
I remember this process is not about judging yourself. You know, for the times when you get caught up in anger or any other difficult emotion, and it's not about getting attached to the moments when you feel calm and concentrated. It's really about approaching your mind with this curiosity and this willingness to learn from every single experience.
Whether it's pleasant or unpleasant.
Yeah, so it's like we're shifting our relationship with our thoughts and emotions, moving away from that constant struggle of grasping what we like and pushing away what we don't.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that actually brings us to the edge of the third stage
Oh, okay.
of mindfulness practice outlined in the Source, which is non-fashioning and perfect equilibrium.
Well, from what you've said, it sounds like this third stage is where all this work, all of this cultivation of mindfulness and concentration culminates in a really different way of being.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's where we'll pick up next time.
I can't wait. Before we move on, though, I'm curious about your personal experience with all of this. Like, you've dedicated so much time to these practices. Has cultivating this deeper understanding of your own mind changed the way you relate to the world around you? Last time we were talking about this deeper understanding of the mind, leading to that third stage of mindfulness practice, this idea of non-fashioning and perfect equilibrium. Those words sound almost paradoxical to me.
Yeah, it is kind of paradoxical, isn't it? Like we spend all this time, learning to skillfully direct our attention to cultivate mindfulness and concentration. And then this third stage comes along and it's like, okay, now let go.
So it's not about achieving some kind of permanent bliss or trying to get rid of all thoughts and emotions.
And really, it's more about recognizing that even the tools that we've been using, the breath, the techniques, even, our understanding of the three characteristics of existence, they're all just stepping stones. They're incredibly useful, but we can even get attached to those.
It's like when you're learning to ride a bike. You need the training wheels at first, but eventually they become a hindrance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Source reminds us that even those cause and effect currents that we talked about in the second stage, even those can become tar babies if we grasp onto them too tightly. Like even our insights can become sources of clinging if we're not careful.
Wow. So this third stage is about recognizing those subtle ways we hold on even to our practice and letting go.
Yeah. It's like a process of refinement. Through diligently working with the first two stages, we develop a sensitivity to the ways that we interfere with the present moment. And we start to see that clinging, whether it's to pleasure or to practice or even to insights, that's the root cause of suffering.
It's like we're peeling back layers of an onion, revealing more and more subtle levels of clinging and attachment.
And as we peel back those layers, something really remarkable starts to happen. The Source describes it as the mind reaching a state of natural equilibrium, like an effortless letting go. Remember those analogies that we talked about? The water fully saturating the dough or the cool spring suffusing the entire lake.
Yeah, those were really helpful.
So it's like the water has finally, permeated every particle of flour, or the cool spring has touched every corner of the lake. There's this sense of wholeness, of balance, that arises just naturally, not through force or manipulation, but through this deep understanding and letting go.
You mentioned last time that the Source highlights some incredible benefits that come with cultivating this level of concentration.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of those benefits?
One of the biggest benefits is a deepening of insight.
Okay.
When the mind is stable and clear, not caught up in those tar babies of clinging and resistance, you can actually see its components, the thoughts, the emotions, the sensations, with this incredible clarity. And you start to see how they arise and pass away. You recognize their impermanent nature.
So it's like you're getting this bird's eye view of your own mind, seeing the patterns and habits without getting swept away by them.
Yeah, exactly. And this leads to another benefit, which is this sense of independence. You realize that true happiness and well-being, they don't depend on external conditions. They arise from this inner stability, this understanding of the nature of mind.
That's really powerful. It means we're not at the mercy of our circumstances in order to experience peace and contentment.
Right. And then finally, the Source talks about how this state of mindful concentration cultivates a deep receptivity. The mind, when it's nourished by this practice, it becomes like a well-fed and rested person.
Oh, I love that.
Open and receptive to whatever arises.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like when we're not exhausted or stressed, we can handle challenges so much better.
Exactly. It's like we create the space within ourselves to hold whatever comes up, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And that receptivity allows us to face difficult truths, to see our own shortcomings without defensiveness or judgment.
Those are all such inspiring benefits. It really paints a picture of what's possible. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that mindfulness and concentration aren't just techniques or practices. They're qualities of being that we can cultivate moment to moment. And this cultivation, it's not about becoming some kind of perfect meditator. It's about learning to live with greater awareness, with peace, and with freedom.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of that line from the Source. It says, you can't be sensitive to the subtle things the mind is habitually adding to the present until you've consciously tried to alter what you're adding.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
It's an invitation to keep experimenting, to keep exploring these practices and see how they can transform our lives.
Absolutely. And as you continue on this journey, remember those tar babies. That clinging, whether it's to pleasure or to practice or even to insights, it just keeps us stuck. The true path to freedom lies in learning to let go.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive today. It's been truly illuminating.
My pleasure. I hope you found this deep dive helpful and that it gave you some new insights and inspiration to explore the incredible potential of your own mind.